But and Dan, you mentioned the challenge of semantics, which is really, I think, at the heart of the matter. You mentioned provenance, a great word from the French word provenir, meaning where the hell did that come from, right? So the getting it right up front, understanding the interpretation lineage of semantics, as you say, provenance, as that's passed downstream, we still need to deal with the reality of legacy systems. Accounting systems, all the transactional systems have been constructed in eras gone by and work. I'm still trying to understand how we bridge the gap of, we can get the information right, so we can create a collaborative, integrated network of information, and it still hits a wall at the legacy transactional systems. Is there, you guys have any comment, either one of you, on how are we going to bridge the gap and recognize the reality of legacy?
I mean, I think for me, one of the things that's really great cause for optimism is, I think, if you look at how people are dealing with legacy technology as a whole at the moment, it is separation of data from platform. So coming into, I'd say, the last decade, generally speaking, all the processing was done by the same system that held all the data. So the core banking system, core processing system. You know, now I think there's been a recognition that the two need to be separated out, and that the key to modernization is essentially having the data processing happen in one place, and then the treatment of that data, as in the actioning of that data, happening separately. I think that's a great step, because then that puts our ability to control the data in a much more kind of self-defining, we've got control over that now. And I think that's the first step, because ultimately, really what we're talking about here is data. And I think the idea of our ability to manage data being locked into a system that may be celebrating its 50th anniversary is probably a bit pie in the sky. Now we're talking about, even before we get to DLT and blockchains, we're talking about just snowflakes and frankly anything that is basically a big database, cloud, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot more flexibility there. So I think for me, step one is we're on the journey, but I still think the challenge is that the solution that we've got to build for here, as I said, is it's got to do one, give complete visibility between the issuer and the investor of who's who. Two, give complete flexibility to the investment bank about what they're going to cook up next. And three is it's got to be able to actually give all the netting benefits and all the operational benefits of a single omnibus account. How you do those things at the moment, it's to use your French, it's a casse-tête. It's like it breaks. Literally, it's like a riddle that can't be solved. But I think the way you describe, as you said, the journey that we can go on. For me, the path is there. We just need to be able to. The technical path is there. The key is getting the right people around the table to define it and actioning it.
Look, if you're expecting any French from me, that's not going to happen.
2 out of 3.
Look, I think in some ways, blockchain's moving in the opposite direction. It's actually moving the data to the object, to the processing engine in many ways. And here's the interesting reason why that's true. Sometimes the movement of value is actually governed by the data about that asset. We just did a big experiment with collateral. The movement of collateral in and out of an agreement is dependent on the characteristics of that asset and the aggregate characteristics of the assets that are in that pool. That requires me to, as part of the transaction, understand the nature of the objects that are moving. So we see these things coming together in important ways, but you're right, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're all together in one place to be able to handle scale. One aspect, the way we see the problem, traditional system to distributed ledger is the same problem as one distributed ledger to another. That is that you have to bridge meaning between these networks. And so you have to have a mechanism by which you can represent meaning in any one of these systems and understand that you have common meaning. So the same problems that we face in the future world of many blockchain systems that all need to agree on meaning at a point in time is the same as I have a traditional system and a distributed ledger and we need to agree on meaning. So the good news is we're solving this problem. It is important. One of the problems in the blockchain world is they've seen themselves as being completely separate and they have disdain for traditional systems. What that means is people have a choice. You can move out to the island, the Galapagos island of the world, and be isolated from everything else, have your value there, and it might be wonderful for you, but it's a very small part of all the value that exists, and oftentimes it's not the high quality stuff. So go ahead and go there, and you'll see some interesting creatures while you're out there, but you're not coming back. What we believe is that these need to be brought together into a consistent system, both where you can move your value to and from. So we want to build a thick bridge between these worlds. And what that means, a lot of that centers around these deep corporate processes that dominate the back end of true finance. Those have to be brought into the blockchain world. So we're working on that, but recognize this is not this isn't some tiny startup somewhere mapping all 6,000 edge cases associated with corporate actions. It takes serious players working together to bring all this into the mix so that value, as we know it, can move freely between these systems.
Yeah, and for me, I think I couldn't agree more, because I think for me, somebody said last week that this is a journey of years and decades of one product, one use case, one step at a time. So I think we've got to, particularly as an industry, I think we've got to get away from the idea that there is going to be some silver bullet that suddenly we are going to it's going to fix everything, because I think that the tendency of that thinking is to wait for that and then see everyone else use it and then they'll leap in. But ultimately, really, the answer is one use case at a time, incremental progress, in the acknowledgement that it is years, but ultimately that, as you said, you're building towards foundational infrastructure. And I think that for me is a very different game plan from what we've been talking about. Because I think the truth is that in 10 years' time, if we don't manage our perceptions right, we will still be sitting here saying, so it was 40 years, now it's 50 years that we've done nothing. Truth is, there is a lot of progress being made.
This is a case for open innovation. Because frankly, no one entity, whether it's DTCC and a collection of other CSDs or other institutions, is going to be able to solve this problem in short order unless we put the problem out there to the clever technologists around the world in open innovation. And you would be surprised under that scenario how quickly these edge cases can be addressed. And this is what we're doing with Launchpad, ultimately, is we want to put the challenge out there. We're going to do some exciting things, build onto this framework so that we can move quickly into this new world, and at investment levels that are reasonable. No one can throw all the resources at this problem that are necessary to solve it all for everyone.
Well, you're wonderfully pragmatic, I'll give you that. And you express some of the attitude that I see being mostly a traditional finance person, is this kind of open disdain for the existence of current technologies. And this whole rip and replace kind of attitude, I can't imagine it given the investment. It's foolish.
They have no understanding whatsoever of the responsibilities that financial institutions have to safeguard financial networks. It's frankly a little bit frustrating from my side. And to be honest with you, there was a lot that I didn't know about the process when we were introduced to this environment. There is a reason why things are the way they are. Be respectful of those reasons, and now let's work to automate and get to the better world.
That's it. And the road to adoption of tokenized and digital assets is through a bridge with traditional finance and perhaps at the edges solving issues we couldn't in traditional finance, and then growing in relevance and adoption. So that's why I think the vision that you have and the acknowledgement of legacy is going to be an important part of this journey, Dan.